the New York Knicks, and Tom Thibodeau says it best. This team is not playing full court basketball. Their defense has fallen apart the last 2 games. Against Indiana, they let Indiana shoot too many perimeter shots, nothing challenged at the key. And you see the difference of this team when it doesn't play defense. And Evan Fournier, who was playing well in the beginning of the season, and even Walker, who has played well as the season slowly has progressed, he's gotten better. Randle has not. Randle has taken steps back. RJ Barrett has taken steps forward. I think RJ Barrett will be their guy, their number one guy, before season's end. So much growth. Who would have thought that he would be an elite defender in this league? But he's learning how to be an elite defender. And we all know what Jimmy Butler was as a defensive player, and it turned into an offensive player. I think RJ was an offensive player that turned into a defensive player. And why not Tom Thibodeau develop RJ Barrett into another Jimmy Butler that could turn into a superstar for the New York Knicks? He's only 21, 22 years old. He's a baby, still growing. I think he's going to be a special player. I think he'll be their superstar player, but they need another guy. And I don't think Randle is their number one, and I don't think he's their number 2. I think he's a number 3. I think they need to look for that number 1 guy that's going to help them in so many different ways, offensively and defensively, as team basketball starts to press. I think that this team is better than what they are. I disagree with some of the guests that we have had on the show stating that the Knicks are a 5th seed. I think they're still a top 4 seed. I still think they have enough depth. The teams that a lot of people think have the depth or have the team to win and beat teams like the Knicks, I do not think the Miami Heat are as good as people think they are. I don't think the Milwaukee Bucks are as good as they were last year. I don't think the Brooklyn Nets are going to be the fully dominant team without Kyrie Irving unless he comes back. Who thinks Philadelphia is going to be in first? The Knicks ran all over them a couple of weeks ago. They're 7-2. I do like Joel Embiid, but Harris, he's all over the place sometimes. And this team, they have no depth. As the season progresses and they start playing good teams, they're going to start to lose, and I think they'll fall out of their position. Am I surprised they're in first place? No. But without Ben Simmons, you could say whatever you want about Ben Simmons. He's an elite defender, and he still gives you a double-double every single game. Don't expect the 76ers to be the number 1 seed as the season progresses.
Yeah, I don't expect them to be the number 1 seed either, because I think this is also an emotional type thing. They're trying to rally around the fact that we don't need you, Ben. We could still win without you. How long it'll last is still a big question mark because they lack depth. And that's why the Knicks, I think, still have the edge in that case over the Sixers, even though the Sixers have the star power. If RJ Barrett can emerge as that other star power, then the Knicks will have it too. And in terms of Randle, yeah, he's got to stop forcing shots. Now, he doesn't waste possessions all the time. 7 assists in a lot of different games.
He's a wannabe Carmelo Anthony.
Sure. Efficiency-wise, that could still hurt them in terms of taking bad shots. From a volume perspective, he's not the number 1 type option. In terms of a well-rounded player you need to have on the court, he is still that. But they just need to make sure he's not the one touching the ball all the time. And that's where Kemba Walker will come in, Derrick Rose will come in, Emmanuel Quickley, when he's on the top of his game, will start having those kinds of roles. Even some of the rookies later in the season, and RJ Barrett, he's shooting a lot smarter too. His corner free game has been really good this year. He's not being reckless with his shots as much as we saw him last year and even his rookie season. And defense, he really has improved, which is a great sign for him. And a great sign for the Knicks in terms of the player development aspect, where they can take this top scorer in college. We can even make him not necessarily a great defender, but make him a good defender in that system.
Also, with Williamson, he hasn't played. That stops his development. And John Morant, even though he is playing good basketball, he's really at the same pace he was last year. RJ Barrett is getting better as the games go by. I'm not saying he's better than John Morant right now, and he's not better than Williamson right now. But could he be? If he becomes a shutdown defender and an all-world defender, and he gives you 20-some-odd points a game, 9 rebounds a game, yeah, he could be an elite player in this league. Absolutely. Jimmy Butler has, so why can't he?
Right, the knock on Morant, too, is defense. And he doesn't have the Tom Thibodeau to help him out. So it's definitely possible in that sense. I think Morant, in terms of athleticism, in terms of an all-around offensive game, is still going to be better. But if Barrett's defense grows to the way it has this season and Morant's never develops in his career, I could definitely see that.
He just needs to hit free throws, or an NBA player figure it out. He's had this problem really since he's come into the league. I mean, he's shooting 73%. He should be shooting 80% at the free throw line. As far as hockey teams, there was a trade. I didn't know what it entailed on why Jack Eichel wanted to be traded, but then I read a story that Jack Eichel, him and his family, did not want to get him a fusion because a lot of athletes have had fusions, had problems with their back and shorter careers, a.k.a. Peyton Manning and some other football players. He wanted a disc replacement. The Buffalo Sabres did not want him to go for a disc replacement because no professional athletes ever had a disc replacement and played professional sports. I've had a disc replacement. I believe the disc replacement is so much better than the fusion, and I think he's going to have a longer-lasting career with the disc replacement. Why the Sabres didn't want to agree to it makes absolutely no sense. He's still one of the best centers in the league. Losing him and getting nothing for him. What did they get for him?
Alex Tuck, who's a pretty good winger. Peyton Krebs, who's a prospect that's been okay. Again, it's the Sabres. We'll never know.
Crop won't be on the team by the end of the season.
Sabres have to hope that they keep their players. They've had that problem in the past. They get a first-round pick that is top 10 protected. So if Vegas somehow, for whatever reason, is in the top 10 for picking this year, that first-round pick will go into next year, and then they'll get a second this year. And then otherwise they would get a second next year.
Got nothing for Jack Eichel.
You kind of knew that was the case for how long it's been going. And also certain teams are going to be more lenient in terms of giving them the disc replacement that he wanted in his neck.
It's the best thing he could possibly do.
I don't know why the Sabres are so stingy as it was. You've been a dysfunctional mess, maybe the worst in all of sports.
And you have
for the
one
last
of the
decade.
best, and you have one of the best centers in the league, and he's still very young, 24 years old, and has his whole career in front of him. And you decide, you know what, we're going to trade him for nothing because we didn't want him to have a disc replacement. Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't. For a team that's been a dysfunctional mess for this decade, maybe the worst run team in all of sports right now.
I don't know about that. There's a couple of them here in New York.
The Sabres haven't made the playoffs since 2007 when they beat the Rangers in the first round when Chris Drury scored that goal with 7 seconds left. They bring in all these top guys, all these good free agents. I called them the Islanders retirement home for a while, too, when they were bringing all the old ex-Islanders. And they don't have the leeway to be that picky on how and when and where you get this next surgery. So why you're going to do that to a top player like Jack Eichel is beyond me. You don't have that kind of leeway. You're not a team that's contender here, made some good growth. Even if they're not a great team, you don't have that kind of leeway. Buffalo's been a mess.
It comes to me why the Rangers didn't make a move. Buffalo did not want to see him for a significant amount of time. They're moving him out west. They're only going to see him twice a year. I guess that helps them, but does it really? You probably would have gotten more for the Rangers. I think it would have made more sense to trade with the Rangers, but it came out that Buffalo had no interest in trading with the New York Rangers. So Jack Eichel goes over there to Vegas, where he'll probably stay for the rest of his career and build a lot of greatness over there. Vegas this year is not as good as they were over the last couple of years, but I think they're a lot more talented.
They're a little down defensively this year, but they still have great goaltending. They still have a lot of depth on offense, and now they just added to that with Jack Eichel, assuming he can stay healthy.
A lot of money that they put on there.
Yeah, which Vegas, again, they've given a lot of big contracts to veterans already, Stone and Pacioretty and Marcia, so those guys are veteran guys, but the rest of their team is on really cheap salaries, so they're kind of a middle ground when it comes to their salary.
You probably won't see Jack Eichel until February. Maybe March.
Right. They're doing it for a playoff run. Whether they win the division or not is another question. I think Edmonton's in the lead right now, and they're second. But I don't think that Vegas really cares about seeding as much because they still know that they're one of the most talented teams.
Probably 2-month recuperation and then get stronger. I know because I had the surgery. It took me a month, and I started slowly getting stronger over there. Professional athlete, even with personal trainers, I think they're going to be very cautious and very careful with him. 2 months, and he'll be ready probably at the end of February, beginning of March to get ready for that playoff run for the Vegas Knights if they're in the playoffs.
Right, and again, they have the leniency because the Pacific Division is not like the Metropolitan Division or the Central Division where they have a lot of teams competing for that. Edmonton's played well this year. They're right now first. We've seen good improvements from teams like the Sharks and the Flames, but one, will that last all season? And two, there's a lot of rebuilding teams. You're not dealing with Colorado and St. Louis and Minnesota. You're not dealing with those types of teams. Definitely not the Metro with all those loaded teams at the top, including the Rangers who are second place, believe it or not.
Speaking of the Rangers, Shesterkin, I don't know what happened with him, but he's been playing great hockey for the last 2 weeks. We were talking about Sorokin being one of the players of the week about a week and a half ago. I'm surprised that Shesterkin hasn't gotten player of the week nominees for the way he's been playing for the last week and a half. He's been sensational, a big part of why the Rangers are right now in second place in the Metropolitan Division. I know it's early. They play 2 more games than the Islanders and Pittsburgh or whatever, but they're playing great hockey. Gallant has this team playing on all cylinders. They're playing good team defense. Maybe Gallant was the right guy for this team. Who knows? We won't know until the season progressively gets deeper, where this team starts to plummet and where this team is going to be in the mix with this Metropolitan Division, which is very talented. Hurricanes are undefeated.
The Panthers are NHL undefeated. They only lost one in overtime. They actually play today, which is ironic. But in terms of the Rangers, the only thing that's been down for them this year is they're still having trouble in close games, which they had a big trouble with that the last 2 years with a lot of these young players. But beyond that, they're playing very well, well-rounded depth, getting young guys to contribute. We've seen the third line play play well. Even some of the veterans they brought in, they've started to play well in that stretch. Zibanejad has been phenomenal. Panarin's been very good. And that defense, I wouldn't say it's great, but it's definitely good where you could trust it a little more. And Shesterkin has been phenomenal. Outside of dropping the puck, making a bad play in overtime against the Canucks, which that was kind of a bonehead mistake, leaving the puck down and not covering up. Beyond that, he's been fantastic. It wouldn't surprise me if he wins some kind of Player of the Week award, too, because his stretch before that was very, very good, where he had a couple 40-save ones, then he had a couple 30-save ones where he just allowed one goal. Very impressive.
Panarin's not scoring, by the way.
He's passing, though, so I'm fine with that.
He's not scoring. They put him on the line with Zibanejad. A lot of Ranger fans are going crazy about it. Why are you putting your two best players on the same line? Maybe because Zibanejad is a better center and he's a better winger, and that's what you usually do. That's why you trade the better center for the better winger.
Well, not only that, you don't want to mess with what's working right now.
Well, I think Zibanejad is a sensational player. He's going to make Panarin better. I think he was playing with the two youngsters, and we all know what the two youngsters are going to do. They're going to make mistakes, and they're going to put Panarin in the worst positions to fail. So I think Panarin is put on the Zibanejad line to play better and actually start figuring out how to put the puck in the net, which I think he will. He's a 30-goal scorer on a bad year. He'll go on a 10-game, 10-goal streak where he's the hottest player in hockey. That's how good he is offensively, scoring-wise. But is that enough? Is that going to help you win? I don't know. And with the Rangers, is this defense going to be able to hold up throughout the season when they start playing the better teams and they play the Islanders? And I say the Islanders because the Islanders are slowly but surely becoming what they were last year. Right. You're seeing why a lot of people pick them. And I'm not saying that because I'm an Islander fan. There's a lot of people picking the Islanders to win the NHL Stanley Cup this year. They have the most depth out of any team in hockey, all four lines, and they might be missing one player, one offensive talent that could really get them to that next level. Boychuk's contract was traded yesterday. Now they've actually secured almost $10 million. You know what Lou Lamariello is going to be doing at the trade deadline. He's going to be lurking and scheming on who he wants to bring in and who he wants to trade and sign in the offseason. So expect something big now that Boychuk was traded. They gave a conditional draft pick, which could be a second. That doesn't hurt Lou Lamariello because, as you see, he gives away first and seconds like it's no tomorrow. And he still has a fairly really young team, but also very good veterans. I expect Lou Lamariello at the trade deadline to make a move and bring in a big name to go and play with Barzal and give them that solidified offensive player that Islander fans have been craving to put on beside Barzal, which hasn't worked right now with Palmieri. Even with Anders Lee, I think you need another speed guy that can help him out and take the pressure off of him and make him the closer, the shooter, which will open up the ice for him to become more prolific offensive player.
You know, it's ironic. You mentioned a lot of people picking the Islanders in the Stanley Cup this year. My pick, ironically, was the Islanders against the players they're most likely to trade for with Tarasenko. Yeah, that was actually my pick at the start of the year.
Tarasenko is definitely a guy that they're going to be looking at, and they have the money now. Trading Boychuk, it was very hard to move Boychuk's contract, but Lou Lamariello, he found a way to get rid of Andrew Ladd's contract. He found a way to get Leddy's contract out of there. And now he's found a way to get Boychuk's contract out of there. And he gave all the veteran or all the young, talented players on this team the contracts, but worthy contracts where they're not schemed or closed up, where they can't make moves in the next 2 or 3 years that make them even more of a Stanley Cup contender. So they really position themselves. And Lou Lamariello is a genius. Say whatever you want. Back-to-back GM awards. I don't care what Jeff said, that the Montreal GM should have gotten it. That's horse. Danny, know what. Danny. I'm not going to say it. Lou Lamariello made, the past 2 years, he made 2 valuable, most important trades at the trade deadline, which helped the Islanders go all the way to the Eastern Conference Championship and 1 goal away from going to the Stanley Cup and probably winning a Stanley Cup.
Maybe Anders Lee as well.
What he did with Boychuk only opens up the door on what he wants to do at the trade deadline. And trust me, Lou Lamariello will make a trade at the trade deadline. Win or lose or borderline playoff team. This team makes a trade. They bring in a Tarasenko. Trust me, people are going to say that they're the favorite.
The other advantage that the Islanders might have over some other teams that might be in that kind of position to trade for an offensive player like that is the connections that he has in the Eastern Conference. We were talking about it with the Sabres. They didn't get as much because they traded him to the West, which makes sense to a degree. But the Islanders are not afraid to do that kind of thing where he has the Toronto connections if they want to do a Nylander or a Marner type trade. They have obviously the Devils connections, which they've already plummeted a lot of different guys from. So Lou Lamariello Lamariello is not afraid to say, all right, I'm not afraid to have this kind of competition go elsewhere.
And he's got a lot of pieces.
Dominate me. Whereas another team might be worried about those kinds of things in terms of direct competition.
He's got a lot of pieces, too, right now. A lot of good young players. Right now in their farm system, they have the kid Salo. I don't think they're trading him because he looks really good.
No, and I don't think they'll need to trade him.
But they have Kiefer Bellows, who's available. They could trade him. They've got players, and they can move on with some players. Bailey, if they want to trade away that contract and not give up the money that they've taken off with Boychuk's contract. So they've really positioned themselves very, very well to make that move if they want to make that move at the trade deadline.
The other underrated one that could be interesting if nothing happens with him specifically, because I know there's been issues with the team, is if they want to take on a big contract. It's kind of similar to Tarasenko's as Patrick Kane, too, depending on what happens there, because Chicago's awful right now. They just got their first win of the season, I think, 2 days ago.